Let's give our unbiased take before we start discussing points here. Not my unbiased take, but my bias before I'm influenced by this. By the way, this is real psychology. If you want your real opinion of things, you need to poll people before discussion starts, so they have their actual opinion. In fact, that's what I've been trying to remember to do when it comes to patch notes, for people to have an accurate representation of how they actually feel about patch notes. I encourage people to look at patch notes first, develop their opinions, then come and listen to my take. But yeah, anyway, my opinion on projectile versus Hitscan. Let's make this really simple. Let's pull up the Overwatch hero cast. All right, projectile heroes. Let's get our freaking epic pen. What we're going to do is we're going to make this really, really simple. And we'll say low skill floor character, high skill floor character. All right. Red or medium skill floor character. We'll do pink, yellow, and blue. Pink is easy. Yellow is kind of hard. Blue is hard. All right. Blue. I will say medium skill floor character. Relatively high, low, medium, I guess, for a hit scan. I'd actually say Echo's pretty high. I'd say Genji's pretty high. I'd say Hanzo's medium, Junkrat's low. I'd actually say Mei's medium. I'd say Pharah's medium as well. I'd say Reaper is low, high, medium, high, medium, low, and then high. No, I said skill floor, not ceiling. I agree with you that like a really, really, really high level junk has like really high, but like to pick up the character. So if we look here, let's look at this. So we have hit scan, one for hit scan. Let's get a different color here. 1 for hit scan, 2 for hit scan right here. And then 2 for projectile, right? For low, right? Low. And then I'll do it down here so you guys can see medium. Okay, so medium for projectile is, we'll say, this is very rough, guys, so just bear with me. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. I should be doing tallies. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then for hit scan, 1, or no, we forgot Pharah. So 5, 1, 2. I think it's just those 2. 1, 2. And then high term skill. Yeah, high would be 1 for hit scan, 2 for hit scan, 3 for hit scan, 4, 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then for projectile, we got 1, we got 2. And that's mostly it. So the key thing here is not the total number of characters, because obviously it's the ratio that matters. There's more hit scan characters than there are projectile characters. But the reason why it's important to point this out, that the ratio is generally that projectile characters, in general, in my opinion, have slightly lower skill floors. It's a little bit easier to pick up and get value out of a Junkrat, a Torb, right? Even a character like Pharah, than maybe a character like Tracer or Sombra. Just in general. And I think this has historically been the case for quite a while. It is a slight bias that where a lot of projectile characters are generally seen as lower skill characters. That's not 100% true, and generally I think the effect is relatively slight, but it is worth pointing that out before we get to the video. And I think that's part of the reason why. And if we actually screw it, I'm going to go back. The other problem with hit scan bias is that in general, if we were to rate like value ceiling, all right, listen carefully, the amount of value that you get out of optimizing a character, right? Instead of doing this tediously again, let's talk about which characters have very high value ceilings if you're really good at them. Ashe, yes. Cassidy, yes. Echo, yes. Genji, yes. Hanzo, yes and no, not as much. Sojourn definitely very high, Widow high, Tracer high. I think Sombra's kind of somewhere in between. But you're going to notice this is, again, where hit scan bias is a little bit higher, where you could be the world's best Junkrat and you just can't play in certain situations. You just can't play in certain situations. So that, to me, is the real hit scan bias, is that certain projectile characters, because they're noobier, Torbjorn's a great example, only has, and Junkrat to an extent, only has so much skill expression so that it's very difficult to squeeze value out of him. Because you get better and better and better, but you're not necessarily rewarded for that value. Because there's only so many things that you can do. There's only so many things that you can do. I mean, even Hanzo, right? Like Hanzo ultimately comes down to being simply a worse hit scan 9 times out of 10. Sonic placement matters. Dragon Strike placement matters. Storm arrow management kind of matters, right? But those are overall like significantly less important than things like the cooldown management that a Tracer has to do or a Sombra can do and get value out of, right? And so it's not just that these noob characters hurt. The noob characters hurt the character expression themselves because from Sprixie, who I believe is a GM player, these characters don't have the same level of value when played at a high level, so it screws over the projectile players. So in my opinion, this is why when we address things like Junkrat, it's not just to make him harder to play in lower ranks, it's to allow him more ways to be better in high ranks. So that a lower ranked Junkrat player has more motivation to learn those new things. Because like when you're playing Genji, you can always play better. And you're playing Tracer, you can go, I can always do a little better. And some of these characters don't really have that. There's not a not real reward for applying yourself to the character. Yeah, I'm not talking about hero pools at the higher level. Like I know that a lot of projectile DPS players at the pro level play Sombra, but that's irrelevant to the discussion. I'm talking about the hero designs themselves. So that's the problem. I think a lot of projectile characters are slightly easier to play and certainly less rewarding to master. That is a design issue. I think part of it is due to the fact that hit scan characters always have that mechanics that does improve infinitely. But that can be compensated by projectile players having more expansive kits with more skill expression, but often that's not the case. Hanzo and Junkrat are great examples of characters that have very, very poor kit designs, where there's just not a lot of complexity. Whereas a character like Mei is maybe a little bit better, but overall doesn't have quite enough to make her work. That's my take. Let's see what Sprixie has to say.
200 HP player it connects with. Was this a little silly to play against? Yeah. As someone who did play DPS Doom in Overwatch 1, I get it. The characters are a little corny. But I truly implore you guys to listen to what I'm about to say. And this is not just for Junkrat, but for a lot of other characters I'm going to talk about. So we took Junk's combo away, so what does that make him now? He's a spam bot. Instead of being the assassin character that Junkrat used to be as well as the tank buster, he is no longer either of those. So what does Junk do now? He spams. What I mean by spam. You sit behind your team, you hold an angle, and you just hold mouse 1. This is both not only really, 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 really boring for the Junkrat player, but really, really boring into the people he's shooting at.
I would say it's a bit of an exaggeration, but he is right. And I think that is a really good point, is when you remove the one-shot identity because there wasn't any other form of skill expression besides the one-shot, then now what does the character do? You've nerfed the character, but you've nerfed the character indiscriminately. And that's a great point. I agree that the one-shot was toxic. I agree, yeah. A character shouldn't be relying off of that for skill expression. But then that's why a rework needs to do more than just that, right?
It changes a lot of breakpoints, and the character went from being something that was a little corny to play into to almost useless. Don't get me wrong, you can still play Junkrat. He has his maps where he's good. King's Road, tight choke points, small rooms. Of course, he's always going to be good in those situations, but the entire assassin playstyle of the character isn't completely gone, but it is way, way, way harder to actually get kills. Also, Junkrat benefits hardly at all from the DPS passive, while characters like Tracer shoot constant bullets through her hit scan weapon, activating the passive ability on anything you're shooting at within an instant. So what am I getting at? Projectile characters got the short end of the stick, basically. Heroes like Hanzo, Genji, and Mei all got completely destroyed because of the Season 9 changes. I'm going to take a special deep dive into Hanzo real quick, because he is the other character besides Doomfist that I hit my peak on in Overwatch 1, and I think what they did to him is horrible. So, what did they do to Hanzo? Hanzo can no longer one-shot. For some people, this is a huge, amazing moment. Thank God Hanzo cannot one-shot me from across the map with the logs anymore.
We actually had an extensive talk about this in the Group Up podcast yesterday. I recommend checking that one out. But basically, we came up with some solutions. Sumito thinks that we need to add back the induction and being able to hold the induction while wall climbing. I agree with that. I think Dragon Strike dealing with deployables is also good. I agree with that one too. I suggested having slightly faster induction speed. so that he's able to pull his arrows faster, feel a little bit more fluid, and then maybe reduce the damage even further if necessary. I think that these changes could be cool.
And for other people like me, it's, oh god, I can't one-shot anything anymore. How am I going to kill anything? Before I continue on, I'm going to go ahead and get this out of the way. Why the hell can Widowmaker still one-shot people, but Hanzo can't?
Samito brought up this argument yesterday, and I think this is a bad faith argument. Hanzo does provide some sort of short to mid-range pressure and a little bit of utility, but if you remove Widowmaker's one-shot, there's literally nothing that character does. Like, literally nothing. It's the same argument that he just used for Junkrat, where it's like, you took away his one-shot, so now what does the character do? I don't like Widowmaker's design. I think she's maybe the most unbalanceable character in Overwatch history. But like, you can't treat that as a legitimate balance argument. If you think that Widowmaker is unhealthy for the game, remove her one shot, sure. But it's a bad faith argument. It's a very bad faith argument.
Is it because of the scope? Is it because
it's the only
she can
thing she
grapple away
does
in an instant and not be stuck?
It's the only thing that she does. Her pressure output from range is she doesn't do consistent good DPS without the threat of the one shot. I agree with you guys. I freaking hate Widow too. She's the worst. But like, it's just a bad faith argument. I think we can go in different directions. I think this is a waste of his time.
Stopped? I don't get it. I don't understand why a character that's almost unanimously hated by the community can still one-shot, and there's not even a second tank to try and persuade or dissuade the Widow from taking crazy angles and one-shotting people anyway. So with that being said, why does this matter to Hanzo players? Hanzo is literally Widowmaker, but he doesn't have a scope,
That's
and he's projectile. Meaning instead of just point and shooting, you need to lead your targets, you need to predict your targets, and
yes, but his effective ranges are dramatically different. Look at the clip of what we're watching right now. Can you imagine a Widowmaker doing this with Sonic and Storm Arrow and Lunge and Wall Climb? It's complete apples to oranges, and this is where I think the argument loses its teeth. Like, there was a real opportunity there, right? I think the Junkrat one was a good start, and then we've just kind of like meandered off in different directions.
You need to understand where your shot's going to hit. Thus, it is my opinion, and mine alone, that Projectile Hanzo takes way more skill than Widowmaker ever will. A lot of
I mean, I don't know. That's a hard one to say. It depends on what you define by skill. To pick up, no, I think Hanzo's way easier to pick up than Widowmaker. To execute at the highest level, there is a lot of cooldown management that Widowmaker doesn't have to worry about as much, but also Widowmaker has a much more consistent like skill ceiling. And she is rewarded for that skill ceiling better than Hanzo. That's true, but that's not really the argument here.
Projectile characters thrive off of burst damage, meaning Hanzo hitting the one shot, Junkrat hitting his combo, Genji hitting a dash into a right-click melee, but every single one of those things I just mentioned can no longer happen.
And the thing with Hanzo is Hanzo has the tendency to be able to spam more, which is why a lot of those one-shots can feel a lot less earned.
Just don't understand why characters who, in my opinion, take more skill are being punished. Don't take this the wrong way.
And I disagree, and that's my whole point, is that Hanzo's problem is his value ceiling isn't there. Like, you can get really good at Hanzo, but there's only so many things that you can do with his kit. It's literally just mechanics, and long-distance projectile mechanics are very inconsistent, right? That is a weakness of projectile characters as a rule. So you have to find ways to make there more choices in this kit and not in just the shot itself.
I'm not saying Hitscan doesn't take skill. I'm saying it should take equal effort to get equal results on different
crazy
types
kills
of heroes.
These are crazy Junkrat clips, I will say.
Take Ana versus Moira. Ana is a hitscan healer where you need to hit your shots, and Moira is not. Moira is a character where you can just hold mouse 1, flail your mouse around.
But it's total apples to oranges. Again, it's a bad faith argument.
And heal your whole team. But you're basically doing the same thing, but one person is not having to struggle or focus nearly as hard as the other. For a DPS example, imagine you are on Havana, and there is a Widow defending at the very back of the map, and you are on Hanzo. All the Widow player has to do is see you on their screen.
Because that's Widow's perfect situation. Give the analogy now, but play Widowmaker on Lijiang Tower Control Center into a Hanzo, or on that exact same King's Row clip on early third or second point. Right? Hanzo has so many more positioning options and so many better dueling options.
Move the cursor over your head and click. Hanzo's over here doing fucking mental gymnastics, trying to figure out the correct angle to shoot.
Because he can take the correct angle. It's a responsibility that he has to, but that option is what allows his skill to be way more flexible than Widow in that situation.
This arrow where it will hit their head, and they could.
Do you think Widow would love it if she had wall climb and lunge? In Sonic?
Be moving, so you need to predict their movement as well. Does that not seem fair? The funny part is that Hanzo can't one-shot, but Widow still
People don't understand the difference. Yeah, exactly, Jolly. People don't understand the difference between value and skill setting. Like, it is actually an unbelievable distinction to make, to say that the amount of value that you get out of min-maxing this character versus how hard it is to min-max the character are two different things. Like, Ball is a bad hero, but he was unbelievably hard to min-max, right?
How does it make any damn
It's an important
sense?
distinction.
Listen, I hear the argument too. Well, no one liked getting spammed through a choke and getting one-shot by Hanzo. Nobody likes getting one-shot across the map by a Widowmaker they can't
That
touch.
is true.
So,
That is
and
true.
by taking away these characters' abilities to assassinate, get kills on their own, have resources to fight after they've gotten a kill, basically, in my eyes, it just turns them into another spam hero, which I don't think Hanzo should have ever been that in the first place. So how would I fix Hanzo or make him feel better?
All right,
Just
this
give
is
him
the
the
cooking.
one-shot back, but reduce the size of the arrows back to what they originally were, or arguably, maybe even a little smaller.
I mean, his projectile is already really small. But I mean, I mean, at least this is a reasonable solution. So it's more of a skill shot, right? I get that, sure. I think that there's like way more options here, but without giving him the one shot back, but we'll let him cook.
Then maybe increase the cooldown on storm arrows, lower the damage on storm arrows, or increase the cooldown on his leap. I cannot tell you guys how frustrating it is to line up a shot on an Ana sitting so far away from me, watch that arrow fly perfectly into her head, and she is just alive on 1 HP. Well,
To me, that's the problem, though, is that we don't want another Widowmaker. We don't want another character that can one-shot from a million miles away. One-shots should be earned. That's part of the reason why snipers are so controversial, not just in Overwatch, but in the first-person shooter genre. Because the concept of a character that revolves around a one-shot and has effective range is not good for the game. A lot of people, I think, look at the Hanzo thing and be like kind of like what Tasteful back. I'm not reading that name. I can't believe I started to read that name. Saying like, oh, we'll just make it harder to get those one shots, right? I don't think that's the solution. I think we need to move the opposite direction. I think that like what that would mean is that make Hanzo even more RNG, where you're either getting value from that one shot or you're getting zero value. I think that that's like, we can have something in between that doesn't destroy the character's identity, right? Right?
on the other side of the coin, if I'm a Widowmaker, I grapple up, and if I...
It's why people hate Widowmaker, right? This isn't necessarily true, but there is this impression that either my Widow's popping off or she's doing nothing. And in some ways that is partly true, right? And that's a part of the design that feels very frustrating to play against or very frustrating to play with, right?
I hit the skill check of putting my
It's not a
crosshair on
Hanzo
her
problem.
head at the
It is
right
a
time.
first-person
She just
shooter
dies.
psychology problem that you have to
Anyway,
play around.
on to a new topic. Cole Cassidy. This hero went from unbelievable trash, which she should have stayed, to just unbelievably broken. We live in a world where Cassidy has
live in a society.
275 HP.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter the HP. It doesn't matter the HP. We've already talked about this, guys. We already talked about this. Cassidy gained less effective HP than the average person because he already had 25 more HP. But he already had 25 more HP. So going from 250 to 275 is percentage-wise less of an increase from 200 to 225 unless there's a specific breakpoint that it breaks. He is broken, but it's not because of the HP necessarily. It's because that was the same, actually stronger in Overwatch 1. Now you could say that, well, he was allowed to live more dive breakpoints nowadays. And that is true. That is true. That's the only fair argument I can say for the HP, is that there's some breakpoints that change in this. But a lot of it's just to do with the fact that his ult and roll have repeatedly received buffs over time. Sojourn has lost her one shot. Hanzo has lost his one shot. And the Season 9 hitbox changes made hitting headshots noticeably easier with Cassidy. I felt like Cassidy benefited more from those changes than a lot of the other DPS casts.
If someone told me back when I was playing Doomfist in Overwatch 1 that Cassidy would have 275 HP one day...
But it's irrelevant. It's irrelevant. It's like the thing that it doesn't matter. Like, could you tell me if the Doomfist would have 500 HP and be a tank? Like, who cares? Like, it doesn't matter. It's bad faith argument after bad faith argument over and over again. Like, you can have a legit problem with Cassidy. I think that there are, but that's just like, the problem with these videos, guys, the problem with these videos is not that criticism is bad. He's seeing Hanzo's identity not being lacking, Junkrat's identity lacking, Cassidy being broken. And then he proceeds to go in the complete wrong direction. And the reason why that's so bad is because it destroys the value of the argument.
On top of that, they made it even easier to hit shots on Cassidy. Is that not... Like, I can't believe I'm talking.
But see, you have to address the point there. Well, they made everybody easier to hit shots. See, you're wrong. Well, okay, now hang on. The way that Cassidy worked, though, is that his projectile size is disproportionately allowed him to benefit more from it, because the percentage of shots that you were missing to Cassidy pre-patch to post-patch affected him more than characters like Bastion and Reaper and so on, right? Like you could go through and you could look at win rates and you could explain that, right? And maybe use some anecdotal evidence. I mean, I anecdotally use some evidence, right? I'm not going to say that I'm immune from that, right? But like again, that argument is so easy to poke out. So it's like, yeah.
Like I don't understand why we are making it easier for people to play Hitscan when almost everyone who plays against Hitscan doesn't have fun.
Have you guys ever played versus Junkrat, Pharah, or Torbjorn? Again, bad faith argument. You got to be really careful with this stuff. I would rather play versus Tracer. I mean, in an unpocketed Sojourn and a Cassidy on most maps than I would versus a lot of the rest of the cast. This is the same argument when people were like, "Oh, Tracer sucks, Tracer sucks, nurse Tracer, nurse Tracer." Well, what would you prefer to play versus? Versus what would you prefer to play? What would you prefer to play? Do you prefer a Junkrat May meta or a Torbjorn or Pharah? Like I think novelty, is important. Like having Hitscan be meta for such a long period of time at the highest level because of the issues that we talked about before the video is a good point, right? But again, then we need to address why that's the case.
And I repeat, I am not advocating for all Hitscans ever to just be nerfed into the ground and like never playable ever again. But what I am saying is the character should reward skill. So if someone does play Cassidy and they're
but remember, they do.
hitting crazy shots on me before Season 9. You know what? I died in a game, so I'm probably still going to be annoyed. But at least I know he hit the shot, and it's not because the game made his bullet bigger. To be 100% honest with you guys.
But they did the same thing to projectile characters.
It just angers me that the characters that I spent so much time learning have either been put on a tank roll or have become utterly useless now. Or, well, maybe not useless, but they play nothing like how they did when I fell in love with them. Like, at least with old Junk combo, he had to be relatively close to you so you would have a chance to shoot him. I am aware they nerfed Widow's range to one-tap headshot kill, but I do not care. It is still outrageous. They did nerf Widow after the initial Season 9 changes with her bullet size.
Good clip.
But guys, I never played Hitscan in Overwatch 1 except Tracer.
Hitscan benefited way more from hitbox than projectile. You might be right.
And I felt like the real Kenzo out there on Widow. Like, I was doing crazy shit on this hero that I spent no time ever.
I wasn't. But I think it's just because I suck at Widow.
I'm
not gonna lie with you.
And then I decided to go play Hanzo.
This is not, by the way, I hope that you guys come clear with one thing. I don't think this is a purposeful thing when it comes to like Blizzard just hates projectile characters. I think Blizzard is cautious about buffing certain projectile characters because of how broken they are. Has dealt with certain projectile characters that have one-shots that are not Widowmaker, right? Junkrat, Hanzo, and so on. And has also had too many projectile characters that don't have good value ceilings, right? And has not addressed that problem. But I don't know that is purposeful. This is where, again, we get into the conspiracy series side of things, which really muddies the water in a lot of these good arguments, which sucks.
Role passives, I really do. I agree with Samito's take on them. I think it is so stupid. But Hanzo can't apply the role passive like Cassidy can, like Ashe can, like Tracer can. They just can't. He doesn't have the fire rate or the potential to do that. The
I agree that
scale
the
between
passives...
Hitscan and projectile has shifted so unbelievably much that whenever I play Hanzo, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, wow, if I'm playing Ashe here, he's dead. Wow, if I'm playing Cass...
And that's probably why you're struggling. Let's not lie. That definitely has an impact on how you perform. I mean, it's proven that has an impact on how you perform. It's one thing. I told you guys, opinions snowball. Opinions snowball. You could be right about your impression, but that your impression makes your play worse.
Here, he's dead. But I don't want to swap off a character I enjoy.
But yes, the role passive is generally feels more complementary to Hitscan because of how easier it is to apply consistent pressure from most Hitscan characters. I noticed I said most. Where Widowmaker, Ashe, not as benefited from the DPS. Actually, that's not true because Ashe has Dynamite. But like a character like Hanzo, no good. May is okay. Junk struggles, right? What else? What other heroes are there? Venture, I think DPS passive is very useful. You got splash damage, pretty easy to apply. Symmetra, Torbjorn's pretty easy. Pharah's pretty easy. Echo's pretty easy. But I'd say like Genji's pretty easy to get value DPS. So, you can't even, again, paint with a broad brush here. This is Hanzo and Junkrat mostly struggle with the DPS passive. Maybe a couple of other characters to a lesser extent, right? But then you could also say that Widow, and I guess it's mostly Widow. Yeah, I'd say Widow. So there is a hit. I mean, Cassidy as well. Like, ironically, like I know we're talking about how broken Cassidy is, but Cassidy, when you're not shooting a tank, is not as the DPS passive doesn't matter as much. Matters more than, let's say, a Hanzo, right? The ability to apply damage frequently, but it is something. So you can't play. My point is, you can't paint with a broad brush here.